MES College Marampally e-learning.
Hello everyone. In this video, we are discussing about Environment Impact Assessment, in short EIA, presented by me, P.K.Abdul Gafoor, Faculty, Department of Commerce, MES College Marampally. Let us discuss about what is EIA. There are different aspects written here, such as EIA is an environmental study comprising collection of data, prediction of qualitative and quantitative impacts, comparison of alternatives, evaluation of preventive, mitigatory and compensatory measures, formulation of environmental management, training plans and monitoring arrangements, framing of recommendations and such other components as may be prescribed. Next we have steps in the EIA. Actually, certain questions are raised to explain the steps, and the next slide we have the answer to these questions. First of all, we can describe what are the questions. Screening. First step is screening. Is an environmental impact assessment necessary? Scoping questions. What should be included in the study? Next, impact ID and prediction. What aspects of the project will cause impacts on the environment? Impact mitigation. How can the design be changed to reduce the predicted impacts? Reporting. What are the key issues to be taken into account by decision makers? Decision making. Do the benefits of the project outweigh the environmental cost? Last one, monitoring and evaluation. Were the environmental impacts correctly predicted? And the next slide we have the components of the EIA, and these are the answers to the above questions. Screening. To determine whether project require a full or partial impact assessment study. Second, scoping. To identify which potential impacts are relevant to assess, to identify alternative solutions that avoid, mitigate or compensate adverse impacts on biodiversity, and finally to derive terms of reference for the impact assessment. And the third one, assessment and evaluation of impacts and development of alternatives. To predict and identify the likely environmental impacts of a proposed project or development, including the detailed elaboration of alternatives. Fourth one, reporting the Environment Impact Statement EIS or EIA report, including an Environmental Management Plan, that is EMP. Review of the Environmental Impact Statement based on the terms of reference and public participation. Decision making on whether to approve the project or not and under what condition. And the last one, monitoring, compliance, enforcement and environmental auditing. To monitor whether the predicted impacts and proposed mitigation measures occur as defined in the EMP. Next we have what is EIA 2006. An EIA is an important process for evaluating the likely environmental impact of a proposed project. It makes a scientific estimate of the likely impacts of a project, such as a mine, irrigation dam, industrial unit, or waste treatment plant. It is a process whereby people's views are taken into consideration for granting final approval to any developmental project or activity. It is basically a decision-making tool to decide whether the project should be approved or not. The draft notification is issued under the powers vested in the central government under the Environment Protection Act 1986 to take all such measures for protecting and improving the quality of the environment. Next, we are discussing about the problematic controversial EIA draft 2020. And what is that? The new draft has been proposed with the aim of making processes more transparent and expedient. But in effect, the draft proposes the removal of several activities from the purview of public consultation. The notification envisages two kinds of approval: prior environment clearance, that is easy, with the approval of expert committees, and environmental permission or provision EP without the approval of expert committees. We have here some examples. For example, if a company wants to build a dam on a particular river, the EIA would consider how the building of the dam would affect the environment, including the people living in the area and close by. Perhaps it would think of the trees that need to be cut in order to build this dam, and or the impact of building this dam on the lives, land and livelihood of people living upstream and downstream from it. A key part of this process is public hearings, where the views of those who are likely to be affected by any given project are taken into consideration. While on paper this process sounds just and systematic, in practice it has sadly left much to be desired. Often, projects are sanctioned without due process being followed. Public hearings are manipulated, for instance by the company concerned sending its own people to pretend to be local representatives, or even by threatening locals into not voicing their concerns. In order to understand why this happens with alarming regularity, it is perhaps useful to understand the background of the EIA. And this is the history of the EIA. In India, while the EIA was formally adopted in 1994, it has mostly acted in effect as a rubber stamp to legalize the granting of clearances to corporate and government takeover of lands for development projects. Even so, the regulatory framework that has been put in place to protect vulnerable populations and the environment has for long been a thorn in the side of big business and industry, whose representatives claim that having to follow the process deters investment. However, the floating of this process has massive outcome for the environment as well as the lives of many people. Take for instance two recent incidents. After the Bcom oil well disaster, it was revealed that the project has been set up without holding mandatory public hearing. Similarly, the manufacturing unit in Visakhapatnam, from where deadly gas leaked in May this year, killing and poisoning people, was set up without proper environmental clearances being obtained. Evolutions. These are the evolutions in India. It was started in 1976-77. Then the government of India also enacted the Environmental Protection Act in 1986. Till 1994, the environmental clearances from the central government was an administrative decision. In 1994, under the Environmental Protection Act rules of 1986, the Ministry of Environment and Forest (MOEF) issued a notification making environmental clearance legally mandatory for expansion and modernization for the projects. And the government wants to amend the EIA. Why is this a problem? Why the new EIA draft 2020 is a problematic situation? In these circumstances, one would imagine the government would want to strengthen the regulatory procedures in order to ensure the problem implementation of the EIA process. So the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climatic Change in March 2020 released a draft notification to amend the EIA process that will further dilute the regulatory mechanisms that have been put in place to minimize damage to the environment. Firstly, the draft notification reduces the notification period from 30 days to 20 days before public consultation takes place, thereby making it is very difficult for ordinary people to go through technical EIA reports of projects and make a thorough assessment about how any given project might impact their lives and environment. Second, the draft notification exempts many projects from requiring any public consultation for approval at all. Third, the current draft notification reduces the frequency of submission of EIA compliance reports to the State Environment Impact Assessment Authority (CEIAA) and Environment Ministry from twice a year to once a year. Fourth, the draft notification institutionalizes the process of obtaining environment clearances after the project has commenced. This shall lead to industries going ahead with the projects without an environmental clearance. Let us return to the example of the recent gas leakage which took place at the LG Polymers plant in Visakhapatnam. The company in question was operating without environmental approvals for over 2 decades. And what can you do? If you would like to voice your opinions on the amendments recommended in the Environment Ministry's draft notification, you can have the letters and you can write in with your responses and suggestions to the MOEFCCs at EIA 2020, and here are the email IDs written here. Then we can have the petitions, online petitions against the draft EIA notification. Scrap the EIA notification 2020, aiming 20,000 signatures, then 15,000 signatures immediately. Then sample letters are there written here. We have the sample letters to the Environment Ministry on draft EIA notification, then to the Center for Policy Research, then for the then by the student bodies, and these are the different citizen movements done against the EIA draft 2020. Over 60 former bureaucrats. Then comes student unions, national fish workers, then advocacy groups, and so on. Conclusion: environment impact assessment is a very beneficial step to check whether the project is environment friendly or not, since environment development is a result of interaction between natural resources and technology supported by designed for people, so all human activity should be economic, social and environment friendly. I hope the video made aware to you all. Thank you.